listeners, episode 3, The Black Door.
Okay, so...
Is this even... Where?
Fuck!
I think... Oh my god. I think I actually... Oh my god. Yes! Yes! I'm actually the god of microphone. All of you are beneath me. Kiss my goddamn feet, you filthy, uneducated peasants.
Of course, Your Majesty. Thank you for blessing us with your almighty genius. What would we do without you?
You know, I'm pretty sure there was a guillotine exhibit back there if you want to continue lording your superiority above us, Mads.
The Rebecca King threatening me bodily harm? How could this ever happen?
Believe it or not, listening to you whine about audio quality for the last 20 minutes has made me a little bit less fond of your presence.
Well, at least I have jewels.
I can, and will, shove your mic pack down your throat, Barker.
Ooh, tough crowd. Tough crowd. Think you're still up for recording, Oscar the Grouch?
You know, I think Becca would actually strangle me if we did all this tech nonsense for nothing.
Yep. Ready for your count? Alright. 3, 2, 1...
Welcome back, my lovely phantoms of the night. I hope you all enjoyed Becca's editing magic, which let you skip the last 20 minutes of technical agony. I, unfortunately, had to live it, and am currently contemplating a change in career. For those of you who do wish to hear nearly half an hour of static, periodically broken by me threatening to wring Maddie's neck, we'll be putting that gem under our Patreon-exclusive bloopers. Now, on to our new exhibit. The Black Door.
The Salem's creativity never fails to astound me. Truly.
For those of you who don't know, this exhibit is literally just a circular room with a black door in the middle. There's also a bunch of pictures on the wall, but none of them are labeled. Actually, is anything in here labeled?
No, the Black Door is the museum's quintessential relic, and they think that labeling it would take away from its natural mystique. Whatever that's supposed to mean.
Oh yeah, because a big door is so scary.
Hey, splinters are no joke, Barker.
This is probably the most splintery door in existence, seeing as how, according to the museum, the Black Door is as old as humanity. It has existed for just as long as we have, if not longer. There were so many statements and files about the Black Door on their website, it was honestly absurd. Personally, I thought it made the most sense to start at the supposed beginning. This personal statement was recorded by the Salem Museum in 1963, and is the thing that first put the Black Door on their radar.
Salem takes statements?
I guess so. I mean, where else are they going to find all this stuff? Garage sales?
Following this statement, the museum dedicated all of its resources to locating and extracting the Black Door. How exactly the museum went about extracting a wooden door is not listed on their website, so I suppose the world will just never know. What a tragedy. Once the door joined their collection, dozens of people apparently began coming out of the woodwork with stories and testimonies. Some of them had been passed down generations through diaries and fairy tales traded over the years. Now, without further ado, I present to you, my darling listeners, the story of the man that started it all. The personal statement of one George Blackwood. I honestly don't know where to start. Do you want to hear about Arthur or Ellie, the clearing? You lot are supposed to be the experts here, though I suppose that means there's only one thing you really want to hear about, doesn't it? You want to know about the door. Well, to hear about the door, you're going to have to learn about Arthur. So I guess that's where we'll start. My brother, Arthur Blackwood, was, well, it sounds a bit foolish, but he was a bit like King Arthur. My family was farmers, you see, had been for generations. The farm in Yorkshire was where every Blackwood had been born and raised for decades, centuries even. The land would always be passed on to the eldest son, but everyone knew Arthur would be so much more than just a farmer. He was destined for greatness, my parents were sure of it. He was strong and quick as a whip, not to mention unfailingly kind. He was always looking out for the little kids in school, making sure no one picked on him. They used to follow him and his mates around like ducklings. Everyone listened to Arthur. Didn't matter if you were at school, at the farm, or in town. Arthur's word was law. A real once-and-future king. By comparison, I was a right mess. I was born sickly and frail, with weak lungs that had the nasty habit of giving out on me the moment I did more than a jog. I could barely help out around the house or farm. My parents held some tentative hope that my smarts would make up for my delicate nature, but it was for naught. My head was just as weak as the rest of me. Once they came to that realization, I faded almost completely from my parents' thoughts. All of their hopes laid on Arthur, not his sickly little shadow. Between any other siblings, this may have spelled disaster, but I didn't need my parents' smothering affection. Not when I had Arthur. My brother would spend nearly every free moment he had with me, running around the farm from dawn till dusk, getting his mates to include me in their troublemaking, dragging me along on trips to town and into the woods. Everyone saw me as below Arthur, everyone but my brother. To him we were equal. It was just the two of us against the world. Or, that's what you say. Me and you, Georgie. We're gonna go out there and do something good. My brother didn't care about doing something legendary or revolutionary. He just wanted to do something good. Anyways, we found the door in the woods behind the farm. Arthur and I, but mostly Arthur, had been sent out to chop some wood. At some point we started egging each other on. At the time there was a rumor going around that there was a bear in the woods, and Arthur and I decided to play a game of chicken to see who would go the deepest into the forest. The game quickly came to an end when I tripped over a rock and nearly broke my bloody ribs falling down a hill. Arthur was laughing himself sick by the time he joined me in the clearing. My brother was in the middle of ribbing me when I glanced over his shoulder and saw it. In the middle of the clearing there was a large wooden door. It was so big the splintery wood seemed to touch the sky itself. The door was pitch black, black as night and ink and raven feathers. The door handle and hinges were shiny gold, glinting in the dark abyss. Before I even knew what was happening, I was pushing past my brother and walking towards the door. I needed a better look. Arthur started to speak, but stopped as he too caught sight of the oddity. What was a door doing in the middle of the woods? Who put it here? Where did it come from? Those questions were quickly shoved to the back of my mind as I got close enough to touch the door. I dragged my hand down the front of it. The wood was split and ripe for splinters, but it didn't pierce my hand, not even once. Eventually my fingers drifted down to the handle. The metal was warm in my hand. I idly considered twisting the knob. It was then that Arthur caught up with me, his hand on my shoulder snapping me out of my reverie. "Now who the hell put this thing here?" he had asked, and I, my hand still burning with the warmth of the metal handle, made some weak joke about a lazy construction worker. Then Arthur pulled out his pocket knife. I asked him what he was doing, and Arthur had given me that grin. The charmingly boyish one that always warned me mischief was afoot. Well, it's finders keepers, right, Georgie? We have to let everyone know we found the door first. And then he put his knife to the door frame and started carving. G-E-O-R. And suddenly the G was gone. Arthur stopped immediately, and together we watched as the wood pushed back together. The E was gone, then the O, and finally the R. The wood looked just like it had before. Not a single sign of Arthur's neat carved writing was left behind. Hesitantly, he started again. A, R, T, and then the A was gone. D, O, the D was gone. It got to the point that as Arthur carved, the wood knitted back together the moment his knife moved past. In a moment of frenzy, Arthur stabbed the knife into the door, all the way to the hilt. We watched as the door slowly pushed the knife back out until it clattered to the ground. I was giddy. An indestructible, presumably magical door, right behind our house. It was something out of the storybooks, the kind of otherworldly encounter that turned regular boys and girls into heroes. Arthur seemed more worried about the whole thing. He suggested telling our parents, but I shut him down fast. There were so few things that belonged to just the two of us. But the door could be ours. A magical secret between brothers. Just for Georgie and Artie, I told him, and I saw him crack in the face of my pure enthusiasm. He was curious about the door too, even if he wouldn't admit it, and indulging in me was as good an excuse as any. So, from then on, the door was our little secret. Whenever we had the chance, we would sneak off into the woods. For the most part, we did what we always did, just we did it with the door. Homework, wrestling, chores, talking. If we could do it in the woods, then we did it huddled together by the door. After a while, we came up with a game. Who could do the most damage to the door before it healed up? We had to come up with a new method every time. At first, Arthur would always win. He was far more skilled with knives and axes than I was, and could take entire chunks out of the door before it would close back up. Then, the more methods we tried, the more creative we had to get, which leveled the playing field a bit. I nearly burned a whole meter of the door the day Arthur nicked Dad's lighter. Things weren't perfect, of course. Our parents still resented me. The rest of the town didn't give me the time of day, and after Arthur quit school to help more on the farm, his mates didn't have a reason to let me tag along anymore. But none of that mattered, because I had Arthur. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. Slowly, so slowly I could pretend that it wasn't happening, my brother began to drift away. At first it was little things. I had school all day, and he was busy with farm work. It made sense that we had less time together. But then he started taking meals in his room. Started spending what little free time he had with his nose buried in a book. Started talking to a few of the girls in town. Started joining our father for a glass of gin in the evenings. Started refusing to visit the door. It all came to a head one night at dinner. It had started off normal. Our parents talking to Arthur about farm work, the townsfolk, the usual. Their silence and near refusal to look my way was also typical. It was a dynamic I had long grown used to over the years. Then Arthur, brilliant, dependable Arthur, who was meant to change the world, said something that flipped the whole world on its head. "I volunteered," he said, and immediately the room froze. Like the slightest sound or movement could set off a bomb. My fork was stuck in the middle of squishing my green beans, but in that moment I would have rather died than move it and break the strange silence that had settled over the table. "For the war," he added, and just like that, the room exploded. Dad was screaming, demanding to know who would care for the farm in his stead, and Mom was weeping, mourning a son who was still right in front of her. And I was furious. I could feel my nails digging in the palms of my hands, and my body shook with the force of the hot well of emotions bubbling up inside me. Arthur was leaving. He was leaving to save lives, to be a hero, to do something good. He was leaving me behind when he promised it would always be us together against the world. The burning, all-encompassing rage reached my feet, and suddenly I was pushing away from the table and out the back door. The cool night air hit my face like a whip. It felt like I was being consumed from the inside out, and all I could do was run. My lungs began to ache. I was sprinting harder than I ever had in my life, and my body was falling apart at the seams as a consequence. The burning of my lungs only spurred me on, though. They were part of the problem. My weak, sickly body was the problem. It was the reason my parents hated me, the reason the town ignored me, the reason Arthur, who lovingly looked after even the most pitiful of farm creatures, was abandoning me. My lungs were the problem, so I'd run until they gave out, until they burned away and my body was nothing but a melted mess of blood and bone. Maybe then my family could finally find something worthwhile about me. I didn't realize where I'd run to until I tripped on a root. Slamming to the ground pushed what little air I had left in my lungs, and I was left gasping on the ground like a fish. I tried to gather my bearings. The glint of metal caught my eye. I'd ran all the way to the door. Its hinges and handle glowed in the moonlight that flooded the clearing. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours, that I laid on the ground heaving like a dying animal and staring at the door like a man possessed. Eventually I forced myself up. Every part of me ached and protested the movement, but I couldn't help it. I had to get to the door. The door was magical, the last safe haven of my childhood. The door would fix this. The door would stop Arthur. The door would set him straight. The door would keep him here. My hand wrapped around the icy handle, and suddenly a thought hit me. For all of Arthur and I's test, we had never once tried to open the door. Looking back on it, we were probably scared. An indestructible door. A genuinely magical door. Something like that could go anywhere. Something like that could easily separate Arthur and I. And at the time, that was the last thing we wanted. Somewhere, deep in the back of my mind, I wondered if my family had noticed my disappearance yet. Dad seemed pretty wrapped up in yelling, and it always took Mom a while to calm down from hysterics. Arthur had shown just how much he cared about my existence the moment he went into town with the intent to enlist. They made it clear just how little they all wanted me around. So I resolved for once to not be a disappointment or a nuisance or a failure. They wanted me gone so badly, then who was I to deny their wishes? I twisted open the handle. The door had opened just a crack. Just enough for me to see the faintest shimmer of something otherworldly, when a hand suddenly latched onto my shoulder and yanked me back. I was spun around and met face to face with an absolutely furious Arthur. His face was flushed with indignation, brow furrowed, and mouth set into a scowl. He held an axe in his white-knuckled grip. "What the hell were you thinking?" He yelled at me, for once using his height to loom over my frail form. "Running off into the woods in the middle of the night? What if there were wolves or a bear out here? What would you have done?" I would have ran." "Run? You, run. You can't run more than 5 feet. For once in your life, be serious, George." Arthur had never mocked me for my weakness before. I could feel the rage that had calmed at the sight of the door roar to life in my chest. My lungs and heart ached, and in that moment I wanted nothing more than for my brilliant, perfect brother to feel a fraction of my pain. "I am serious. I am, even if you and everyone else in this damn town don't think so. You call this being serious? Running away, throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the night. Maybe if everyone stopped treating me like a child, then I wouldn't act like one. Maybe if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have to do the work of 2 sons. I didn't ask to be born like this. Yeah, well, I didn't ask for you to be born. In the wake of those words, silence reigned over the clearing. Arthur and I were mere inches from each other, but it felt like miles. The flaming wreckage of our brotherhood sat between us. It was worse than the war Arthur was leaving me for. It was all blood and gore, pain and suffering. Looking back on it now, I'm sure Arthur regretted what he said. He had seemed to deflate some, no longer looming quite as large. In that moment, my strong, dependable brother looked weak. On the other hand, I had never felt so wild as I did in that moment. Like a feral animal, hurt and ready to lash out at any who came near. I could feel the blood rushing in my veins, boiling as my broken heart pumped it through my body. I wanted to hurt Arthur. The desire was all-consuming and all-encompassing. I wanted to reach into his chest, wrap my fingers around his heart, and squeeze. I wanted to mince him to pieces until he was just blood and bone. I wanted to burn the perfect monument of my brother to the ground. But Arthur was right. I wasn't strong enough to do any of that. I didn't have the power to make any of those things happen. But the door did. I put my hands on Arthur's shoulders, and I told him the truth. If you want to leave me so bad, then just go! Then I shoved him. Most people talk about seeing red when they're angry, that their memory is muted and muddled by the rage. I remember watching my brother fall through the door in crisp, perfect Technicolor. I remember the shock, the way his eyes widened, the way his hair ruffled in the sun breeze, the way his arms futilely came up to try and catch himself on the door frame, the way the moment his foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut, his still falling form stuck behind splintered, dark wood. The thunderclap sound of the door shutting snapped me out of it. I slammed into the woods, hands desperately grasping at the handle. I didn't mean it. I swear, I didn't mean it. I twisted and turned the handle with all of my might, but it wouldn't budge. I clawed at the wood and only got bloodied splinters in return. At some point, I started to wail. I wanted my big brother. I wanted Artie. I wanted the boy who would ruffle my hair and soothe my nightmares. I wanted him to hug me, to tell me that it was all right, that he forgives me, that he loves me because I'm his Georgie, and someday we're going to go out into the world and do something good. Together. I still want that. Nearly 60 years later, and I'm still waiting for my big brother to show up and make everything all better. But Arthur's never going to show up. Not while the door has him. At some point, I went home. My parents became convinced that Arthur had run off with the army after his argument with Dad. They spent years waiting for a son who was long gone to come home, and after the war ended, they spent even more mourning for a son who was long dead. I never told them about what happened. Call it cowardly, but I preferred living with their neglect than with their disdain. Arthur's absence was like a missing limb. Phantom pains were common, but eventually I learned to live without. Mom and Dad reluctantly left me the family farm, and life went on. I married, had children of my own, and for the most part forgot all about that damnable door and the blood on my hands. It wasn't until Ellie, my oldest daughter, came to me after playing in the woods that I honestly remembered it. It's hard now to articulate just how horrifying it was to have Eleanor, my sweet, darling daughter, crawl into my lap and whisper excitedly to me about what she found in the woods. A magic door, black as night, with a handle as round and shiny as the moon, was how she described it. And in that moment, I swear it was my long-dead brother's eyes staring out at me from my daughter's face. I knew it had to be the same door. Still, I questioned her for the better part of an hour, praying that I was mistaken. Every detail was exactly as I remembered it. Dark, splintery wood, a strange circular clearing, a golden handle that seemed to draw you in, There was only one thing different. I asked if the door had been damaged in any way. To my unending surprise, Ellie said that it was. In the center of the door there was a long, thin cut, as if an axe had been put through the wood. Arthur was holding an axe when I pushed him. It was still in his hands when the door shut. I nearly screamed, but then Ellie was poking my cheek and asking me what was wrong. Looking at her childish pout, I knew then and there I had to finish what Arthur started. My daughter would not be tempted by the door as I once was. I waited till dark, long after I had tucked Ellie into bed, before I picked up my axe. It was relatively new. The family axe, a blunt old thing, had gone missing the night Arthur disappeared. My dad had bought a new one without even thinking about it. The wood handle dug into the palm of my hand, grounding me as I walked the familiar path to the door. It felt almost nostalgic, entering the unchanging, moonlit clearing, the last remnants of my childhood with Arthur. The door stood, silent and still as always. For the first time in my life, I was hit with the realization of just how small I was in comparison to it. Not even just in size, but in age. The door is ancient. Older than me, older than my father, older than the farm, older than the trees and the dirt and the sky itself. Humanity is little more than an insignificant speck of dust compared to the door. But I didn't care how old the thing was, or how powerful, or how large. I came to finish what Arthur started. Figures that my perfect older brother would be the first one to leave a mark on the door. But in the end, I would be the one who won our game. I would be the one to do the most damage to the door, because I was going to chop the damn thing to pieces. I approached the door. My eyes locked on the golden handle. Regret and grief clogged my throat as I finally saw the thin sliver missing from the center of the door. I ran a finger down the last mark my brother made in this world, hefted the axe, and swung down on the wood. It took hours. Chopping, swinging, screaming, crying. I said everything I wanted to say to Arthur. Apologies, curses, please. I offered up every broken piece of me I had tucked away since my brother's death and used it to smash the door to nothing more than splinters. The sun was high in the sky by the time I finished. I watched as the broken down frame of the door slowly melted into the earth. Something as small as me could never kill something as large as the door, but I knew intrinsically that it would not return here. I planted daisies in the clearing. They were always Arthur's favorite. I miss my brother.
Well, that wasn't depressing in the slightest.
Where did the brother go? Where did the door even lead?
I don't know. I feel like I should call Victor.
Come on, Jules. Don't tell me you're letting some random old man get you down. He probably wrote that whole thing in some retirement home, creative writing class or something.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, he destroyed the door. Did the museum really make a whole replica based on some old man's ghost story?
That's a new low even for Salem, and they have an entire Bermuda Triangle section.
So in conclusion, some kid got mad about his brother going to war, and as an old man wrote a sob story to feel better about him being MIA. Yet another fantastical mystery solved by Girls After Ghouls podcast.
Follow us on Spotify for even more incredible detective skills.
John Watson and Sherlock Holmes weep because they know they have nothing on us. All right, my phantoms, we'll catch you all in the next exhibit. And a warning to all my darling arachnophobes. I think I saw some cobwebs in the next room, so be mentally prepared for some creepy crawlies in the next segment.
Jules, you coming?
You two go on ahead. There's something I want to check out first.
All right. Don't spend too much time talking to your diary.
Madeline, I swear to God. I hate her. I hate her so much. This is stupid. Something about this story is freaking me out. Maybe I'm just projecting my own weird brother issues. Well, for a replica, this thing is pretty accurate. Black splintery wood, gold handle, the whole 9 yards. Wow, they even got the axe mark in the center of the door. Now that's dedication. It's just a door, right? A replica at most. There's no way it could actually go anywhere. What the hell am I even doing? I just need to open it. Then my hair will stop standing on end, and I'll stop feeling freaked out, and I can continue this stupid episode. What the hell is this? How? Becca, Maddie, we need to... What the fuck? Hiya, Jules. How you doing? What are you? I'm you, silly. Just a little waxier. Though the camera did get your good side. So what do you think? Am I prettier than you? A wax machine. But that's impossible. There's no way it can make something like this. Come on. Did you seriously think a wax machine inside a research institution like this would be normal? Research? No, this is a museum. This is a stupid museum full of fake ghost stories. Oh, and here I thought you were supposed to be the smart one. Though, seeing as how you opened the black door, maybe not.